The old wooden door of the Ward farmhouse swung open. With a deafening screech, Elias had just entered, the smell of dampness choking his throat, when the darkness inside shifted. 5 figures stepped out, closing in like wolves around their prey. Not thieves, not vagrants. 5 Apache girls, tangled hair, torn clothes, but eyes glowing like embers in the night. The leader, tall and thin, held a rusty knife tightly. She took a step forward, her voice hoarse but firm, cold as a slash into the silence. "You will not leave here. From now on, you belong to us." The gun in Elias's hand suddenly felt like a stone. The other 4 girls raised their crude weapon sticks, sharp pieces of wood, hemp rope, wrapped around their wrists. None of them trembled. There was a calm that had long been ripe in their eyes. The calm of people who had seen the worst and still stood there. Elias slowly opened his hands, away from the gun. "I am Elias Ward," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "This is my house. The papers are in my pocket." He nodded slightly toward his chest. "I don't want to hurt anyone. This house has kept us alive." The girl with the knife replied, her eyes never leaving his. "If you stay, you must not reveal us. If you leave, you will die on the road." The last sentence fell as a simple, unthreatening truth. Elias paused for a beat, then recognized the tracks he had passed. Rows of empty tin cans arranged in neat rows by size, a small spool of thread, a bent needle stuck in a crack in the boards, the cold fireplace with the smell of old ash, and on the wall beside the stove a calendar of despair written in fingernails. "How long?" Elias asked, his eyes fixed on the wall. "Long enough to hear the sound of horses from 7 directions," she said. "And to understand, no one believes the words of an Apache woman when the truth touches the rich." "What is your name?" Elias asked. "Niall," she said, and then inclined her head toward the 4 people who stood fanning out. Tala, Sayan, Aponi, and Mika. Each name was spoken like a landmark, a stone set in the ground. "We don't ask for mercy. We want to live." Elias took a deep breath. He had prepared for a leaky roof, for a collapsed stable, for old bills, but no one had told him that his uncle's house was a hiding place for 5 people. "If I stay," he said slowly, "there will be conditions." A flash of wariness passed through Niall's eyes. "Listen, no one points a gun at a woman's back in my house," Elias said. "If they come, they'll see me first. And you," he looked at the wall, where time had scratched into a scar. "You don't need to count the days with your fingernails anymore." The corner of Sayan's mouth quivered ever so slightly, as if a thought had just come and gone. Tala dropped her shoulders by half a finger, loosening her grip on the stick. A pony tilted her head, studying Elias as she would a new horse. Straight bones, fiery eyes. But was she strong enough? "You say you're the master," Niall said slowly. "A master is someone who takes the beatings for others. Can you do that?" Elias looked her straight in the eye. "I am the blood master of this land," he said, "and I will not let anyone burn down my house." He had barely finished speaking when they all heard it. Far away, on the dirt road, a steady, hard beat on the ground, the sound of horse hooves. They were dry, like handfuls of gravel dumped into a metal basin, piled up, getting closer. A pony raised his head, his ears listening with all their strength. Mika tightened the hemp rope around his wrist, his eyes darkening. Sayan gently blew out the single candle on the table. The darkness fell over the room like a thick blanket. 7 directions, Niall said softly, tilting her head to listen like someone who knew the wind in the cracks of the door. 3 horses ahead, more behind. Elias swallowed. Fear passed through him like a cold knife. But then a strange void, a void of decision. He glanced quickly around the room, drawing a map in his mind with the instinct of a herdsman. The front door facing the open yard, the back door leading to the stables, a section of wall by the kitchen with a strange wood joint. "Is there a hiding place?" he asked. Niall answered by putting down the knife and running her hand along the edge of the plank. A piece of wood gave a slight pop, revealing a space large enough for a person to crawl into. "In the wall," she said, her eyes never leaving him. "Their footsteps are coming into the yard." Elias nodded. Tala, Sayan, Aponi, Mika, go inside. Niall. You last. He moved toward the front door, placing his hand on the latch, feeling the rough wood scrape against his sweaty palm. Turn off the stove. Don't let the fire cast shadows. What will you do? Mika asked, her voice as deep as the earth. Be the master of the house, Elias said. Nael paused beside him, close enough for Elias to see the dust of the road on her eyelashes, and her gaze was no longer entirely cold. If they ask, she whispered, say you're alone. No, Elias said. I say, there is a master, and he's standing at the door. Outside, the reins pulled tight. The horse's hooves stopped abruptly. The crowd cast long shadows across the yard, the sharp sound of the spurs scraping the dry steps like knives scraping gravel. The latch of the door shook, like the house's chest holding its breath. Come in, Elias said one last time. The panel closed softly, swallowing. The sound of hooves pounding the ground was like a drum, getting closer. Elias stood blocking the door, his back against the old wooden frame, feeling the strained breathing from the dark room behind. The Apache girls had retreated into the gap in the wall. Only Nael remained beside them, knife still clutched. Go, Elias said softly. But she shook her head, her eyes flashing in the darkness. If you fall, you won't be alone. On the porch, spurs scraped the wooden steps. A man's voice rang out, heavy with a foreign accent, smooth as oil on water. New master? We heard the ranch changed hands. Come out, let me see you. Elias took a deep breath. I'm Elias Ward, he said, unlatching the door. This ranch belongs to me. 4 figures stood outside, horses spitting white foam from their mouths, breathing heavily. The leader was tall, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight, his hands scarred like slashes from a knife. He looked Elias up and down, smiling faintly. You look like your uncle, he said, absent-mindedly. But he was too stubborn to survive. Elias's heart clenched. I don't know what you want. Another, younger man, stepped forward, holding his torch high, the light sweeping into the house. At that moment, Nael yanked Elias back, lowering the knife to his throat. Don't let your shadow get in, she whispered, her voice firm. Is there anyone else here? The old voice asked, this time as hard as a hammer. Elias shook his head. Only me. This house has been empty for 2 years, and now it's mine. A dry laugh escaped him. The silver-haired man glanced at his companions. We'll see. The 2 men stormed up the steps. The young man held the torch close to the door frame, the yellow light illuminating every crack in the planks. In the darkness of the wall, Elias heard a rapid, thread-like breath. Nael stood close to him, eyes unblinking, knife trembling slightly in her hand. Just as a hand was about to touch the latch, Elias stepped forward, blocking the way. You have no right to enter here, he said, his voice firm. This is legal land. The silver-haired man nodded slowly, his eyes as sharp as a steel blade reflecting the moon. The law of this land is me. And I want to know, what are you keeping in that wooden wall? A moment of silence fell, heavy as a stone sharpening a knife. Then the neighing of a horse tore through the darkness. A distant howl of a hound echoed, chilling. Elias felt the back of his shirt drenched in sweat. He understood. The night had only just begun, and these men would not leave until they had found what they wanted. Nael tightened her grip on the knife, whispering in his ear, if they come in, there will be blood. Elias looked straight at the silver-haired man. There is nothing here but the new master of this land. If you want to try, you will have to step over my dead body. In that moment, silence suddenly became the most dangerous weapon, hanging between life and death. The torchlight in the courtyard faded, leaving the cabin in a thick darkness and a lingering smell of smoke. Elias let out a long breath, his shoulders as heavy as stone, lifted from his chest. The door slammed shut, but the sound of hooves did not quite fade. They simply retreated, circling like patient predators. Nael lowered her knife slowly, her eyes still fixed on the door. They don't go away, she whispered. They'll come back when they think you're not watching. Elias nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. He turned to the wall beside the stove, where the firelight still glowed faintly. The marks were carved crisscrossing and crisscrossing like spiderwebs. He stepped closer, touching the wood lightly, his fingertips tracing the rough grooves. "What is this?" he asked. A figure emerged from a gap in the wall, Tala, her eyes large and bright, but tired. "Days," she said simply. "Each mark is a day of survival." "How long?" Elias swallowed. A pony stepped forward, her thin shoulders still tense, as if in defense. "More than 200, she whispered. "Since we escaped from the camp, no one has dared to count back. Only forward." Elias shuddered. 200 days in this house, which the whole town thought was deserted? He pictured them, 5 Apache girls, living in secret, carving their marks, eating in silence, sleeping in fear. The wall was now a diary of dried blood. Niall stepped forward, placing a calloused hand on the panel. "Your uncle knew," she said softly. "Marcus Ward helped us hide here. He paid with his life." Elias whirled around. "You mean, my uncle didn't die of the fever?" Sayan, the youngest, let out a bitter laugh. "Fever? They called him that to make people believe. But we knew. They tortured him. They wanted him to tell them where we were." There was a cold silence. Elias felt the blood rush to his temples, his hands clenched into fists. The uncle who had raised him since he was a child, taught him to lead horses, and shared his last piece of bread on the cattle drive, was now murdered for daring to protect these girls. Niall put her hand on his shoulder, her voice strangely calm. "He didn't say anything. He protected us until the end." Elias looked around the room, every detail now changing. The neatly stacked tin cans, the frugal meals. The hemp rope in Mika's hand, the last weapon of a man who had nothing left. The marks on the wall, evidence of every day they had fought to get away from the blade. He felt a heat in his chest, as if 2 weights were colliding. One was anger, the other was determination. "I can't leave you," he said, his voice low. "If my uncle has paid the price, I will not let him die in vain." Mika stepped out of the shadows, his eyes cold but with a fragile light. "You say that now, but when blood is shed, will you keep your word?" Elias looked straight ahead, unblinking. "If necessary, I will keep it with my own blood." Outside, the howling of dogs continued, eerie, echoing down the valley. Niall turned to face the cracked window, her voice low. "They have released the hounds. They will try again tonight." Elias touched the thickly carved wall, as if grasping an oath. He knew, from this moment on, that he had tied his fate to the 5 Apache girls. There was no retreat. The howling of the hounds tore through the silence of the night, followed by the pounding of horses' hooves in the valley. Elias strained his eyes to see the torches dancing in the darkness like red eyes. There was no doubt. They were back, determined this time to let no soul escape the farm. "We have to get out of here," Niall said quickly, her hand tightening on the rusty knife. "If we stay, they'll burn the whole house down." Elias nodded. "Is there another way?" Tala pointed to the roof. "Upstairs, there's a door to the roof, but we have to hurry, before the dogs swarm." The group rushed up the rickety stairs. Each wooden step creaked, making Elias feel as if his heart was about to burst out. When they reached the roof, Niall gave it a hard shove with her shoulder, and a loose plank flew open, revealing a cold, silvery moonlit sky. One by one they crawled out, the moonlight bathing their lean but sturdy figures. Down in the yard, the torches were already blazing, the enemy brandishing their guns and pointing, the hounds with their chains howling. "Follow me," Niall said in a low voice, then led the group across the old tiled roof. Each tile fell to the ground with a loud crash, the sound making the soldiers roar. On the roof! Shoot them! The gunshots were deafening, the bullets cutting through the air, piercing the wooden roof, causing Elias to fall to his knees and huddle close. "Quick!" he shouted, pulling the trembling Scion to continue crawling. They reached the edge of the roof. Below was a large water tank next to the stables. "Jump!" Niall signaled, then dove down, his body plunging into the water with a loud splash, shooting out silver sparks. Mika followed by Tala, Sayin, and a pony. Elias took a deep breath, his heart pounding, then let himself fall off the roof. The cold water splashed in his face, his whole body hitting the ground so hard that he thought his bones would break. But a strong hand grabbed him, pulling him out of the tank. "Niall, run!" she shouted. The group dashed toward the meadow, their feet sinking in the mud and water, Their breathing labored. Behind them, screams rose, and the hounds broke free from their chains, sniffing the smell of mud and sweat, and charged after them. "Over the fence!" Elias shouted. They crossed the wooden bank, while a bullet whizzed past her ear and lodged itself in the trunk of a nearby tree. Sayan screamed, almost falling, but Elias pulled her up. The group ran headlong into the shadows of the forest, the moonlight filtering through the leaves in white streaks. Their breathing was heavy, their legs were weak, but the dog's howls urged them on. Nael led the way, her eyes accustomed to the darkness, dodging between tree roots and crevices. "There's a way out to the stream," she shouted. "The water will wash away the trail." Behind, the riders shouted, and a few more shots were fired, but the darkness and the rugged terrain kept them at a delicate distance. When Elias stepped onto the bank of the stream, the water was cold, and he felt as if his whole body was breaking apart, but he continued on. 5 Apache girls rushed down one after another, the water splashing white under the silver moonlight. Nael looked back at Elias, her voice hoarse but determined. "If you want to live with us tonight, don't turn back." Elias looked straight into her dark eyes, then nodded. As the howls followed him, he knew this was only the beginning of a journey with no easy escape. The stream was so swift, carrying mud and dirt, so cold it took all the strength out of their calves. Elias and the 5 Apache girls followed the stream, crouching under the dark canopy, each step as if on a knife's edge. The howling of dogs echoed, near, far, then fading away. Only the sound of water hitting rocks remained, like the endless sigh of the mountains. When they were far enough away, Nael signaled to stop. They crawled into a damp cave, hidden by gnarled tree roots. A small fire was lit, fragile as if it would go out as soon as it flickered. Its light reflected on tired faces that were bright with life. Elias looked around. Tala was hugging her knees, her eyes heavy. Mika was carefully examining a broken arrow. A pony was wringing her wet braid, and Sayan was shivering by the fire, her lips purple. Nael sat across from him, her face stern. "They'll come back," Elias began, his voice hoarse from the cold breath. "And they know where you are. Why don't they let you go?" Nael was silent for a moment, then pulled a wet cloth from inside her shirt and opened it carefully. Inside were a stack of letters, the writing water-stained but still recognizable in the firm handwriting. "Because of this," she said. Elias took it, his heart pounding as he saw the familiar signature, Marcus Ward. It was his uncle's in 81. "My uncle wrote it?" he whispered. Nael nodded. "He wrote everything. Dates, times, names, numbers of guns, all the arms sales Henrik Weiss made. He knew Weiss was selling guns to both sides, the soldiers and the bandits, to prolong the conflict and then take the profits." Aponi continued, her voice shaking with anger. "Marcus intended to take this evidence to the federal authorities. But Weiss got wind of it. He had us arrested, to force your uncle to reveal where the letters were hidden. And he didn't say anything," Mika added, eyes blazing. Elias held the letter in a trembling hand. Memories flooded back. Uncle Marcus, who had taught him to read, carefully folding each letter to Denver. He'd thought it was just a business letter. It was the nail in the coffin. "So how long did you keep them?" Elias asked. 200 days. Nael looked straight at him. "Counting on the wall, each mark is a day of protecting this evidence. If Weiss gets his hands on it, he'll have no rivals. This whole area will go to hell." Elias sat still. The fire reflected in his eyes, turning into streaks of starlight. "My uncle died for justice," he said slowly. "I can't let him die in vain." Tala looked up, her voice choked. "What do you think you can do? Fight Weiss and his pack alone?" Elias clutched the letter. "I'm not alone." He looked at each of them. "I have 5 Apache women who have survived 200 days of fire. They are stronger than any army I have ever known." Nael frowned, but there was another light in the corner of her eyes, a light of hesitant faith. "Look," Elias continued, "we can't run forever. If Weiss catches up to us, he'll tear everything apart. The only way to get this evidence out into the open. To the feds." No one spoke. There was only the crackling of the fire, the murmur of the water in the stream. Then Sayan whispered, his voice as soft as the wind. "In that case, we must survive until dawn. After a long moment, Nael nodded. Okay, but remember, from this moment on, you are in our fight. There will be more blood, and if you falter, you will all die. Elias raised his eyes, looking at the 5 faces etched in shadow and fire. I will not falter, he replied firmly. Outside, the dogs howled again, fading away but not stopping. In the sky, the moon was swallowed by dark clouds, leaving a thick night, signaling the stormy days ahead. The rushing stream embraced the 6 bodies, carrying them through the dense forest. The water was numbingly cold, seeping into their flesh as if draining all their strength. Elias struggled to walk. His legs were weak, but he still forced himself to follow Nael in front. Each howl of the hounds echoed from the far bank like a knife cutting through the darkness. Stay close to the shore, step on the rocks, leave as little trace as possible, Nael whispered, her voice hoarse from the cold but strong. She led the way, her eyes accustomed to the night like a compass. Behind her, Tala supported the shivering Saiyan, while Mika and Aponi took turns keeping the group balanced. A bullet suddenly whizzed past, piercing the water, creating white foam. Elias was stunned, fell to his knees, his shoulders stinging. Red water spread out, merging with the cold stream. Elias, Saiyan cried, about to rush forward, but Nael stopped him. Be quiet, they will hear. She quickly caught Elias, pulling him against a large rock, her hand pressing against the wound. The blood mixed with the water made her fingers cold. It's not deep. You can still walk. Elias gritted his teeth and nodded. I'm not stopping. We have to keep going. The group followed the bend in the stream, the pale moonlight filtering through the leaves, illuminating their pale faces. When they were safer, Aponi spoke, her voice low but choked. You need to know, Marcus didn't just help us for justice. He also helped us for love. Elias looked up, frowning. What do you mean? Tala took a deep breath, her eyes lost in the past. Marcus promised to marry one of us. He wanted to protect not just with his signature, but with his heart. Nael turned away, but her gaze softened. Elias understood immediately. It was you, he said softly. The one my uncle loved. It was you. Nael did not reply, but tightened her grip around the rusty knife. Her voice choked but firm. He believed that love could save even the outcasts. He Weiss killed Marcus for that love, not just for the letters. Elias felt his heart ache, and not just because of the wound in his shoulder. The image of Marcus, gentle and resolute, now lit up with a deep sense of affection. And now, the burden was passed directly to him. Then all the more reason for me not to give up, Elias whispered. Not just for justice, but to keep the promise my uncle never fulfilled. The wind blew through the woods, the howling of dogs growing closer. Nael turned to Elias, her steely gaze softening for the first time. If you fall, we will all be lost again. Don't let his blood be shed in vain again. Elias nodded, standing up, his wound stinging but his gaze burning. The 5 Apache girls were silent for a moment, then nodded in unison. They continued walking in the cold water, like a flock of resilient birds crossing the stormy night, carrying with them the fragile belief that dawn would come. Above, the dark clouds drifted, revealing a bright moon like a silver knife, shining down on the bloody stream, as if reminding everyone, the real war had only just begun. The moon had just broken through the clouds, shining along the silvery stream. 6 wet bodies huddled under a willow bush, panting as if they had just escaped the jaws of a wild beast. Elias pressed his hand to the wound in his shoulder. The blood had stopped flowing, but his breathing was labored. Nael sat opposite, her eyes fixed on the dark patch where the woods joined the valley below. They haven't given up, she said, her voice hoarse and firm. They know we have the letter. The hounds will find the trail again. Elias nodded, then spoke suddenly. We won't run anymore. We'll go back. All 5 girls turned, eyes wide. Mika frowned, her voice harsh. Are you crazy? There are many of them. They have horses. They have guns. All we have are rusty knives and sticks. Elias stared straight into the small fire that had just been kindled, as if to carve each word into the darkness. If you keep running, sooner or later they will catch you. The only way is to take back all the evidence Marcus has gathered and strike where they least expect it. Weiss's camp. The air was thick, Sayan hugged his knees, whispering, "Going back means walking into the tiger's mouth." "Yes," Elias replied, his voice low but steady. "But my uncle died to keep those letters. If they remain, justice remains. If they are lost, everything will be in darkness. I would rather die fighting back than wait for a knife to be held to my throat." Tala stood up, the firelight reflecting in her wet eyes. "Do you think you can bear it alone? We have counted our days in the dark, Elias. We know the price of life." "That's why," Elias said, looking straight at Niall, "I need you. 5 of you have survived 200 days in hell. You are stronger than any soldier I have ever known. If we join forces, we have a chance." Niall was silent for a long time. Then she stood up, drew her knife, and plunged it into the ground in front of her. "If we do it, we do it all the way. But you must understand, once we go in, there will be no turning back. Blood will be shed, possibly all of us." Elias clenched his hand over the wound, his eyes blazing. "I understand." A pony stepped forward, his face hard. "If we go back, there must be a plan. One group creates a distraction, another group goes in to retrieve the letter. If we hesitate for a few seconds, it's all over." Niall nodded. "We split up. Mika and I will lead the decoys. Tala, a pony, and Sayan will go with Elias, retrieve the evidence. Then we will all escape up the North Hill. The trail will lead to the old town." Sayan trembled. "What if one group gets caught?" Niall squeezed her sister's shoulder, her voice firm. "Then the other group must finish. Even if only one survives, the evidence must reach the Federation." Elias looked at each face before him. They were no longer just 5 ragged Apache girls in the night. They were warriors, with a fierceness and a fire of survival in their eyes. He felt his own blood rise, swirling with that fire. "Then it's decided," Elias said, his voice commanding. "We're going back. No more running." The wind whistled through the forest, carrying the howls of the hounds. In the valley below, Weiss's campfire flickered, like a demonic eye piercing the night. The 6 men huddled in the shade of the willows, looking down at the fire, knowing that all roads to dawn led through blood. Niall pulled the knife from the ground, holding it at eye level. "This is Marcus's blood. This will be Weiss's blood. We pay our debt tonight." Elias nodded, his heart pounding like a drum. "Tonight, we are no longer fugitives. Tonight, we are seekers of justice." Darkness filled the valley, save for the flickering flames of the Weiss camp that lit up the crumbling walls of the old guardhouse. 6 figures lay on their bellies on the hillside, breathing heavily but their eyes fixed on the ground below. "There are 4 horses tied there," Elias whispered, pointing a finger along the shifting shadows at the edge of the camp. "That means some are still on patrol, but Weiss is right in the camp." The fire illuminated the silver-haired man, his sinewy hands flipping through papers on a flat stone table. His eyes narrowed in the firelight, but the smile that cut across his face was cold as a man who had already won. "Marcus's letters," Niall hissed, her fingers digging into the dirt. "He reads them like he's crushing our hearts." Mika gritted her teeth. "Let me cut his throat right now." "No," Elias interrupted, his voice low and firm. "If we rush down now, we'll die in one shot. We have to have a plan." Niall nodded, her eyes burning. "We've talked about it. Mika and I will cause a commotion on the left. When his men rush after us, Elias and the other 3 will go in and get the letter. Don't hesitate. There's only one chance." A pony looked at Elias, his voice tense. "If one group doesn't make it back." Elias nodded, replying firmly. "Then the other group must finish. Justice is more important than life." All 5 girls looked at him. In that moment, they were no longer strangers. They were comrades, their fates bound by blood and darkness. Niall squeezed Elias's hand. "Tonight, you'll see why we survived 200 days." They quietly parted. Niall and Mika's silhouettes slipped down the left side of the camp, disappearing into the trees. Elias, Tala, Sayan, and a pony clung to the right flank, their hearts pounding. A loud stone throw shattered the silence. Then Mika shouted, as if challenging, "Coward, do you only know how to hide behind the campfire?" Weiss's men sprang to their feet, their guns aimed at the darkness on the left. "There! Get it!" Footsteps pounded, the torchlight swayed. "Go!" Elias whispered. They rushed down the slope, crawling over the rocks, their hearts pounding in their chests. Weiss remained seated, flipping through the papers, not in the least bit in a hurry. A sentry stood guard on the right, his eyes straining into the woods, not noticing the four figures crawling along the ground. Elias gave the signal. Tala threw a stone toward the left edge, and the sentry turned in surprise. In that split second, Elias lunged forward, lashed out, and brought him down with the butt of an old gun hidden in his shirt. Get the letter, Elias growled softly. Cyan and Apache rushed to the rock, gathered the scattered papers, and stuffed them into their cloth bags. The firelight reflected on their tense faces, sweat beading their foreheads. Weiss looked up. His silver eyes met Elias's, his gaze full of mockery. Ward boy, he said slowly, his voice ringing like an iron bell. Finally revealed. He drew his gun so fast that the firelight flashed silver. Elias raised his gun, but his hand was still sore from his shoulder wound, and his movements were half a beat too slow. The gun exploded. The bullet whizzed past Elias's hair, lodged in the brick pillar behind him. He stood up, tall, like an old wolf who knew he had cornered his prey. These letters won't save you, Weiss sneered. The law in this part of the world is in my pocket. Niall suddenly appeared at the edge of the camp, knife raised, steel glinting. Let's see if the Apache knife fits in your pocket. Weiss spun the gun. Elias lunged forward, slamming into him. They both fell to the ground, papers flying like a flock of birds being chased away. Pick them all up, Elias shouted. Apache and Tala quickly gathered them up, stuffing them into their pockets. Cyan trembled but still held the stack of letters tightly, his eyes blazing. Weiss wrestled Elias down, his scarred hand tightening around his neck. Elias's breath hitched, his vision blurred. In the moment of life and death, he saw the face of Uncle Marcus in his memory, the one who had fallen to protect the letters. Elias gathered all his strength, punching straight at the scar on Weiss's hand. He roared, his grip loosened. Niall lunged forward, his knife plunging down like lightning, but Weiss spun around, the tip of the knife only scratching his cheek. Blood spurted, his eyes flashing with madness. Arrest them all, he roared, his voice ringing like a death command. From outside the forest, the sound of footsteps returned, the torchlight illuminating the valley. Elias scrambled to his feet, clutching the paper bag, shouting, "Retreat! North Hill!" The gunfire rang out again, bullets tearing through the air. Apache pulled Cyan ahead, Tala followed. Niall retreated, eyes still locked on Weiss. The flames blazed high, revealing that the battle had only just begun. The northern hills glowed in the torchlight that traced down from the camp. Footsteps pounded, dogs howled, and the intermittent sound of gunfire. Elias limped, blood seeping from his shoulders, but his hand still clutched the mailbag to his chest. Behind him, Tala and Apache dragged Cyan over the slippery rocks. Niall, knife still in hand, backed up to shield them. Weiss chased, his gun gleaming. "Don't let them escape," he roared, his voice thunderous. The three remaining soldiers scattered, pointing their guns and firing. The bullets struck the rocks, sparks flying, tearing the air like whips. Elias shouted, "Keep running. I'll hold him back." Niall grabbed his arm, her voice harsh. "You can't do it alone. Justice doesn't need another body." They rushed to a mound of earth, hidden behind old trees. The footsteps of soldiers circled around, the firelight sweeping across the mountainside. Weiss advanced slowly, his silver eyes flashing, the barrel of his gun raised to Elias's chest. "Marcus Ward died a fool," he said, his voice like a hammer. "You will die a reckless death." In that moment, Elias saw his uncle's image flicker through the firelight, the hand on his shoulder, the warm voice. "When you stand before evil, stand tall. Otherwise, it will crush you." Weiss pulled the trigger. The gunshot rang out, echoing into the forest. But Elias stood, eyes wide. Behind him, Niall had picked up the pistol she had picked up from the fallen soldier. Smoke lingered, the firelight illuminating her face hard, proud, eyes blazing. Weiss staggered, her hand falling. The bullet went straight into his chest, piercing through his black cloak. He looked up at the sky, the silver light in his eyes suddenly extinguished. The huge body collapsed, hitting the ground, dust flying. A long silence. Then a shout rang out from the remaining soldiers. Weiss is down. Run. The survivors panicked and ran. Torches falling, lights flickering. The hounds howled a few times and then disappeared into the darkness. Only the heavy breathing of Elias's group remained. Sayan burst into tears, sobs spilling out into the night. Aponi and Tala hugged each other tightly, shaking as if waking from a nightmare. Elias looked at Nael. Her hands were still shaking, but her eyes did not waver. "You're alive," she said softly. "Justice has blood to prove it." Elias breathed heavily, his shoulders aching, but his hands still clutched the mailbag. "It's not just justice, it's Marcus's life, and the future of all of us." He knelt beside Weiss's body. Around his neck hung a silver chain, a badge with a strange symbol, like the sign of a larger network. Elias took it off and handed it to Nael. "This evidence is equally important. He is not just a gun dealer. He is a link in a larger monster." Nael nodded, her voice low. "And we have only cut one claw." The wind blew, carrying away the smell of smoke and blood. At the top of the hill, the six stood still. Weiss had fallen, but the road ahead was long and dark. Elias turned, looking at each face. Sayan was still crying. Tala and Aponi were hugging each other. Mika was clutching her staff, and Nael was silently wiping the blood from her cheek. He said, his voice firm, "We will not run anymore. We will bring everything to the Federation. Marcus died for it, and we will live to finish it." In the last dying light, tanned and calloused faces nodded. Tonight, they were no longer fugitives. They were witnesses, warriors, and bearers of the torch of justice through the night. A thin dawn rose from the horizon, dyeing the sky a pale ash. The morning mist covered the fields, hiding the blood of the night as if the sky and earth wanted to forget. Elias rode ahead, his shoulders still wrapped in crude bandages. A cloth bag was pressed against his chest, containing all the letters Marcus had risked his life to keep. Behind him, 5 Apache girls followed silently, their eyes dark but bright from having been through hell. They rode without stopping until they saw a small town in the valley. Sparse houses, taverns, warehouses, and, at the top, a wooden telegraph tower. It was the only door to justice outside the territory. Nael reined in Elias. "Are you sure?" Weiss bragged that he bought half the government. "If we sent it from here, who would take it?" Elias nodded, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "The territorial government can be bribed, but the Confederacy cannot. Marcus chose the telegram because it is beyond their reach. If the letter reaches Denver, justice will no longer be buried." They stopped in front of the telegraph office, where a gray-haired man was clearing a table. Elias entered, placing his bag on the wooden table. "I need it sent to Mr. Marshall Carson in Denver. Speed. Pay with this earth if necessary." The operator raised his head, his tired eyes flashing with surprise at the blood-stained papers and the signature, Marcus Ward. He sighed, then nodded. "I knew Marcus. He was an upright man. If this is evidence, it will be sent, but be careful. Weiss's eye is still in town." Nael placed the knife on the table, her eyes sharp. "If anyone touches it, blood will be spilled." Elias squeezed her shoulder, shaking his head slightly. "No need for threats. We just need the truth to go." As the telegraph began to crackle, sending the codes that carried justice across hundreds of miles, the group sat in silence. Sayan whispered shakily, "Marcus will see. He will know we are not giving up." Outside, the sound of horses' hooves suddenly rang out. A group of strangers entered the town, but this time they were not Weiss's soldiers. They were Union cavalry, small American flags fluttering on their spears. Leading them was a bearded man, his eyes sharp but bright with trust. "I am Marshall Carson," he said. "I have a telegram with the name Marcus Ward. Who has the evidence?" Elias stood up, clutching his duffel bag, and walked out into the middle of the street. 5 Apache girls lined up behind him, like living witnesses to the truth. He held up the bag, his voice firm. "Here, we hold it, with blood." Marshall Carson took it, opened it, and flipped through it quickly. His old, stern eyes narrowed as he read. He turned to the soldiers. "Arrest all of Weiss's remaining henchmen in town, and protect them." He pointed to Elias and the 5 girls as federal witnesses. The mood in the town changed. Those who had bowed to Weiss retreated into the shadows. The townspeople gathered, whispering. For the first time, hope shone on once feared faces. Elias let out a long breath. His shoulders still hurt, but he felt relieved. He turned, meeting Nayli's eyes. She didn't smile, but her gaze softened, as if in acknowledgement. Together they had carried Marcus's torch out of the darkness. Marshal Carson squeezed Elias's hand tightly. Marcus died, but he left a legacy for which the land will be grateful. And you, Elias Ward, you stood tall as he did. The 5 Apache girls stood behind him, silent, but their eyes shining. They were no longer the hunted. They are witnesses, part of a justice that is gradually being revealed. 3 weeks later, the early summer wind blew across the yellow fields, carrying the scent of hay and new life. The Ward farm, once haunted by darkness and blood, was coming back to life. Fences were rebuilt, the roof patched, and in the yard, clotheslines blew in the wind. There was no more howling of hunting dogs, no more galloping horses, just the peaceful sound of a home being rebuilt by hands and will. Elias stood on the porch, his shoulders still bandaged but healing. He looked out at the yard, where 5 Apache girls worked, the sun shining on his tanned face. Tala giggled when Sayan clumsily dropped the laundry basket. Mika carried wood like a blacksmith. Aponi tended a flock of newly hatched chickens, his eyes soft and gentle. And Nael, her dark hair hanging over her shoulders, hung a clean blanket, her eyes glancing up at the porch where Elias stood. The gaze was no longer icy, but trusting a fire that had been tested. Elias stepped down into the yard and approached. "It looks like home," he said softly. Nael paused, tilting her head. "Home," she repeated, her voice unfamiliar, as if tasting a word she had not dared to say for a long time. Then she nodded slightly. "Yes, home." Something opened inside Elias's chest. He thought of his uncle Marcus who had fallen for justice. If he could see this, he would smile. The afternoon came, and the group sat around the fire in the house. The yellow flames danced on the wooden walls, where the old scars of despair were still deeply etched. But now, beside them, Elias had nailed new planks, so that each scar became part of a stronger wall. Sayan whispered, "We no longer count our days. From now on, we count the sowing seasons." Aponi smiled, her eyes sparkling. Mika added more wood to the fire, her face hard but her gaze warming. Tala leaned her head on her sister's shoulder, giggling. Niall was silent, her eyes on the fire, then turned slightly to Elias. "Do you regret it?" she asked, her voice hoarse, as if testing an old wound. Elias looked around the fire, the faces of the 5 women who had been ghosts in the night, now radiant in the light. He heard the chickens in the yard, the smell of freshly dried grass, the wind rustling through the cracks in the door. And he thought of the journey he had taken, the blood, the darkness, and the choice not to turn away. He smiled, answering firmly, "Number, not at all." In that moment, the old cabin was no longer a place haunted by despair, but a new home built on sacrifice and faith. Outside, the night of the Wild West had fallen, but this time, the darkness was no longer a threat. It is but a backdrop to the flame of a chosen family, burning brightly in the wilderness.